Prince Louis didn't just step back from the spotlight. He was quietly removed, and what forced the palace to finally admit it could change the future of the monarchy forever. Prince Louis vanished from royal life, and the palace waited weeks before saying a single word. Why would the youngest and most visible spark of the Wales family suddenly disappear from balcony appearances, national ceremonies, and carefully choreographed family moments? And why did the explanation arrive only after the silence became impossible to ignore? Hey race, what most people don't know. The absence didn't begin with an announcement. It began with subtle edits, missed events, cropped frames, adjusted schedules, the kind of changes only royal watchers would notice at first until the pattern became undeniable. And what the palace finally confirmed. It sounded calm, measured, clinical, a statement about protected time and decisions made in the young prince's best interests. But for those who understand how the monarchy communicates, those phrases don't close a story. They open one. Because when the institution built on visibility removes a child from view, it is never casual. This matters not just because Prince Louis is a beloved royal figure, but because the British monarchy survives on symbolism. Every balcony wave, every ceremonial appearance, every image tells a story about continuity and stability. When that image fractures, even slightly, it raises a deeper question. What's happening behind the palace gates? And the timeline tells its own story. It began quietly. First, the Commonwealth Day service. The family arrived poised and coordinated. Prince George stood tall beside his father. Princess Charlotte, composed and steady, offered a polished royal smile. But the space where Louis once bounced and waved empty. Then came Trooping the Color. Again, 4 figures instead of 5. Then Remembrance Sunday. Another absence. At first, many assumed it was ordinary. A minor illness. A child's break from media pressure. But when 3 major public events passed without explanation, concern shifted to something else. Calculation. Because the palace does not make accidental omissions. And hey race, where it becomes more complicated. Footage from Louis' last major balcony appearance has resurfaced. At the time, it looked like another playful royal moment. But rewatched now frame by frame, something feels different. Usually animated, Louis stood unusually still. Hands clasped. Expression restrained. His shoulders tightened at the sound of cheers. He leaned slightly away from the railing rather than toward it. Small details. Easy to dismiss. Until a child behavior specialist publicly analyzed the footage, noting posture stiffness, eye contact avoidance, and what she described as emotional withdrawal. Not proof of anything, but not nothing either. And then there was Catherine. In one brief moment, barely a second, she glanced at her son. Not the broad, reassuring smile seen in press photos, but something sharper. Alert. Concerned. A mother checking for signs others couldn't see. Even Prince William appeared to shift subtly, turning toward a senior aide in the background. A nod. Almost imperceptible. The aide stepped back. The cameras never lingered. At the time, no one questioned it. Now it feels like the beginning of a decision already made. But hey race, the contradiction that keeps building tension. If this were routine privacy, why the delayed acknowledgement? Why the tightened photo directives reportedly sent to select photographers? No solo close-ups. No extended lens focus. Why does the official explanation feel so carefully limited? The monarchy has faced crises before, but rarely does it remove one of its youngest public figures without preparing the narrative first. And that suggests something changed internally, something urgent enough to outweigh tradition. Because history shows one thing clearly: when the palace goes silent, it is not confusion. It is strategy. The question is no longer why Prince Louis disappeared. The question is what forced the institution to confirm it, and what happened in the days before that confirmation was released. And that's where the story turns from public absence to private conflict. Now, we begin uncovering the internal pressure building behind the scenes. Behind palace walls, the silence wasn't calm. It was building pressure. Because while the public debated protected time, something far more personal was unfolding inside the Wales household. And it didn't begin with headlines, it began with hesitation. According to insiders close to the royal orbit, Catherine, Princess of Wales, had grown increasingly protective in the weeks leading up to Prince Louis' disappearance from public life. At first, it looked subtle. Fewer appearances, tighter scheduling, more private family time. But beneath that shift was something deeper, a line being drawn. And here's the part that changes everything. Catherine wasn't just adjusting her son's calendar. She was challenging the pace of the institution itself. Royal life is structured, rehearsed, immovable. Children born into it are introduced gradually, but deliberately, to public duty. Balcony waves aren't spontaneous. They are signals of continuity. And Louis, once the most animated presence among his siblings, had become a viral symbol of royal relatability. His candid expressions, playful gestures, they humanized the monarchy, which is exactly why stepping him back carried weight. Sources suggest Catherine began raising concerns privately about pressure, about expectations, about how quickly Louis was being integrated into symbolic roles. Not accusations, not rebellion, concern. But concern, in a system built on image, can be disruptive. The tension wasn't about a single event. It was about trajectory. In one reported planning meeting, discussions turned to upcoming ceremonial appearances. Louis' participation was assumed. It always had been. But this time, Catherine hesitated. She questioned whether another high-profile moment was necessary. That hesitation reportedly did not land quietly. Advisors cautioned that inconsistency fuels speculation. That absence invites narrative. That stability requires predictability. In other words, show up. But Catherine's concern wasn't about optics. It was about impact. And this is where the story becomes more complicated. Because Prince William, known for his measured loyalty to royal duty, was reportedly caught between two roles, heir to the throne and father to a young child navigating unprecedented visibility. For years, William has publicly emphasized modernizing the monarchy, balancing tradition with emotional intelligence. But modernization is theoretical until it affects your own family. Then it becomes personal. According to one palace source, conversations behind closed doors intensified after Louis resisted attending a minor engagement rehearsal. What may have seemed like a child's reluctance reportedly signaled something more to his parents' emotional strain. And here's the rehook. If this was simply a matter of scheduling, why did internal discussions reportedly escalate to the highest levels of advisory staff? Because at that point, it wasn't just about one appearance. It was about precedent. If Louis stepped back, even temporarily, it would signal a recalibration of how royal children are presented to the public. A subtle shift, yes, but symbolic shifts matter in monarchy. Catherine allegedly began requesting reduced exposure moving forward. Not indefinitely, but deliberately. A recalibrated approach. That proposal, insiders claim, met resistance from traditionalists within the institution who feared unpredictability. And then something changed. William, who had initially sought compromise, reportedly reviewed documentation from child development advisors consulted privately by the family. The conclusions weren't dramatic. They weren't alarming. But they reinforced a simple principle. Children under sustained public scrutiny require managed exposure. That professional backing reframed the conversation. Suddenly, this wasn't emotional hesitation. It was strategic parenting. And within days, Prince Louis' upcoming appearances were quietly removed from draft schedules. No announcement, no explanation, just absence. But here's the contradiction that deepens the mystery. If this was a mutual parental decision supported by expert input, why did the palace statement arrive so late and feel so restrained? Because by the time the official confirmation surfaced, internal negotiations had already shifted something larger than a calendar. They had shifted influence. And when influence shifts inside a monarchy, it rarely stays contained. Now we uncovering the private discussions reportedly escalated into a defining confrontation about the future of royal tradition itself.
No, it is very important to me, and I hope we'll be able to have a happy family ourselves, because it's been they've been great over the years, helping me with difficult times, and we see a lot of each other, and they're very, very dear to me.
What happened next wasn't visible to cameras. It didn't unfold on a balcony. It happened in a private room, and according to multiple royal correspondents, it changed the tone of everything. Because stepping Prince Louis back quietly was one thing. Making it permanent or even long-term was something else entirely. As internal debate continued, the issue reportedly moved beyond scheduling and into philosophy. At its core was a question that has followed the modern monarchy for decades. Does tradition adapt to protect the family, or does the family adapt to protect tradition? And this is where Prince William's role becomes pivotal. Publicly, William has always embodied controlled composure. He understands hierarchy. He understands duty. But insiders suggest that as discussions about Louis intensified, his position hardened. What began as cautious mediation evolved into something firmer protective resolve. One senior aide reportedly described a pivotal strategy meeting where upcoming royal events were mapped out for the year ahead. The expectation: gradual reintegration of Louis after a short pause. Controlled exposure. Brief appearances. Symbolic presence restored. But William didn't agree. He questioned whether gradual reintegration was simply a return to the same pressure under a different name. That challenge reportedly unsettled some long-standing advisors who viewed visibility as essential to shaping public perception early. The monarchy, after all, relies on familiarity. The public grows attached through presence. Yet race the contradiction that deepens the tension. What happens when presence becomes pressure? During one particularly charged conversation, William is said to have referenced the evolving expectations of modern parenthood, emphasizing that emotional well-being must outweigh optics. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was measured, direct, and significant, because historically, heirs align with the institution first. Personal concerns are often absorbed quietly. But this moment suggested something different. A future king asserting boundaries. At this stage, the palace still had not released any public clarification. The absence was being managed internally. But outside the gates, speculation had begun to swell. Social media threads, royal commentary panels, photo comparisons highlighting missing frames. The silence, once strategic, was now fueling narrative, which raised the stakes internally. Advisors reportedly urged a concise statement to quell rumors. A neutral confirmation, limited detail. The goal: regain control of the storyline without inviting deeper inquiry. But raced the detail that changes the atmosphere. The wording of that eventual statement was revised multiple times. Initial drafts, sources suggest, described the absence as temporary. That word did not survive final approval. Instead, the language shifted to protected time away from public duties and decisions made in the best interests of the young prince. Subtle, but deliberate. Why remove temporary? Because permanence, even undefined permanence, shifts power. It signals that the family, not the calendar, controls the timeline. And this is where the story takes a sharper turn. Behind closed doors, the debate was no longer about Louis alone. It was about precedent for George and Charlotte as well. If exposure could be recalibrated for one child, it could be recalibrated for all. That possibility carries generational implications. For some within the institution, it represented modernization. For others, uncertainty. The final agreement, according to insiders, wasn't unanimous. But it was decisive. Louis would step back, publicly unexplained, until silence became louder than words. And when the palace finally broke that silence, the world heard calm phrasing. What it didn't hear was the negotiation that preceded it. Because the real shift wasn't the absence. It was the assertion. A future king drawing a line. And once a line is drawn inside a monarchy, it rarely disappears quietly. Another side, we examine what this decision means for the future of the royal family, and why this moment could mark a turning point far beyond one young prince.
But it was something that I think all three of us at the time felt that we really could make a far bigger impact together on, rather than just one of us acting alone on it.
By the time the palace released its carefully worded statement, the real decision had already been made, not in front of cameras, but inside a closed room where the future of the monarchy was quietly debated. Because Prince Louis' absence was no longer a scheduling issue. It had become a question of authority. Insiders describe a high-level strategy session where senior advisors laid out the calendar for the coming months. Major ceremonies, diplomatic receptions, carefully staged public appearances designed to reinforce stability. The assumption was clear: Louis would return gradually. Short appearances, limited exposure, a controlled reintroduction. But that assumption reportedly met resistance. Prince William, usually known for his disciplined composure, challenged the plan. Not emotionally, not theatrically, but firmly. He questioned whether a gradual return was truly a change or simply a quieter continuation of the same pressure. If the concern was genuine, he argued, then the solution couldn't be cosmetic. That shift in tone altered the room. For decades, the monarchy has functioned on continuity. Heirs adapt to the institution. They don't negotiate with it. Yet here was the future king reframing the conversation around long-term impact rather than immediate optics. And hay race where tension escalated. Some advisors reportedly emphasized the importance of visibility for young royals. Public familiarity, they argued, builds trust. The earlier the exposure, the stronger the connection with the nation. Louis had become widely adored. His candid balcony moments humanized the crown. Removing him risked losing that relatability. But William's position appeared to center on something else entirely: sustainability. What happens, he reportedly asked, when symbolism collides with emotional strain? That question hung in the air longer than any rebuttal. Meanwhile, Catherine's earlier concerns, once seen as protective instinct, gained new weight. Documentation from private child development consultations had been reviewed. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming, but clear enough to reinforce a need for managed exposure. At that moment, the discussion shifted from preference to principle. And then came the wording debate. Drafts of the eventual public statement circulated internally. Early language, according to sources familiar with the process, described the break as temporary. That word was removed. Another draft suggested brief adjustment. Also removed. The final phrasing protected time away from public life was intentional. Open-ended. Controlled. Why eliminate time limits? Because time limits create expectation. And expectation creates pressure. By refusing to define the duration, William and Catherine, if reports are accurate, retained control over the timeline. Not advisors. Not tradition. The family. But hay race, the contradiction that adds another layer of intrigue. If this decision was mutual and grounded in well-being, why did internal debate grow so heated? Because precedent was at stake. If Prince Louis could be withdrawn indefinitely for personal reasons, what would that mean for Prince George's preparation as future king? For Princess Charlotte's role? For how the monarchy introduces the next generation to public duty? In that room, insiders suggest, the conversation expanded beyond one child. It became about modernization versus preservation. And when the meeting ended, a quiet shift had occurred. Louis would step back. Not gradually, not conditionally, but decisively. The palace would confirm it only after speculation intensified, maintaining narrative control while conceding the obvious. What the public saw was a calm announcement. What they didn't see was a future king asserting boundaries inside an institution built on compliance. And once boundaries are asserted at that level, they rarely disappear.
Definitely. Well, as you know, Kate's family, she's got a very, very close family, and I get on really well with them, and I'm very lucky that they've been so supportive. Mike and Carol have only been, really sort of loving and caring and really fun, and have been really welcoming towards me, so I felt really part of the family, and I hope Kate's felt the same with my family.
Prince Louis may be out of sight, but his absence is louder than any speech delivered from a palace podium. Because this moment is not just about one young royal stepping away from cameras. It is about a generational shift unfolding quietly behind ceremonial walls. A mother choosing protection over presentation. A father, the future king, challenging long-standing assumptions about how heirs are shaped. The monarchy has survived by projecting permanence, stability, predictability. But this decision introduces something more human and therefore more unpredictable. If tradition can bend for one child, it can bend again. And that possibility changes the architecture of royal life. Publicly, the narrative remains simple: protected time, best interests, privacy respected. But privately, something has already shifted. Influence recalibrated. Authority subtly redefined. The real question now is not when Prince Louis will return. It is what the monarchy will look like when, or if he does. Will this mark the beginning of a more protective, modern royal model? Or will institutional gravity eventually pull the next generation back into its traditional mold? And if a future king is willing to redraw lines for his son today, what other lines might he redraw tomorrow?
If you enjoy in-depth coverage of the stories shaping celebrity culture and entertainment, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected for the next big story.